Yeah,
you were the prince of a goddamn country who dressed up as a Nazi, and now you're trying to come back as the Pope?
Like Meghan and Harry, I've listened to both of them talk. Garden variety retard.
Harry and Meghan say they'd now like to split their time between spending your money in the UK and spending your money in Canada.
It was supposed to be just another book release, another royal biography, another headline.
And I like the subheading, actually. It's not just betrayal, it's power, deceit, and the fight for the future of the royal family.
Another week in the endless cycle of speculation surrounding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But within hours, something strange happened. A statement. Sharp, emotional, unusually direct. And suddenly, everything changed.
The Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, know that they have been rumbled behind their truly deranged statement, suggesting that Tom Bower, for years before he tackled Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, is somehow a conspiracy theorist.
Because when Meghan and Harry publicly pushed back against Tom Bower, before the book had even fully landed, it didn't quiet the story. It ignited it. And the question no one can stop asking now is simple. What are they so worried about? If you want more deep dives into royal stories like this, stories that go beyond the headlines, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. Because what's unfolding here is far from over. The moment the statement hit the internet, it spread fast. Not because it was long, not because it was detailed, because of its tone. Words like deranged, phrases suggesting obsession. A clear attempt to discredit the author, Tom Bower, before his latest work, had even reached most readers. And that's where things took an unexpected turn. Because instead of shutting down interest, it did the exact opposite. Searches spiked, pre-orders surged, and within a shockingly short window, Bower's book climbed the charts. Not quietly, but loudly, almost as if the response itself had become the marketing campaign. Now pause for a moment, because this is where the story gets more complicated. Tom Bower is not a new name in British media. For decades, he's built a reputation writing detailed biographies of powerful figures, politicians, celebrities, business leaders. His method is well known: long investigations, multiple sources, like a legal background that shapes how he presents claims, and perhaps most importantly, a track record where his books often stir controversy, but rarely lead to successful legal challenges. That doesn't mean everything he writes is universally accepted, but it does mean one thing: people pay attention. So when Harry and Meghan responded so quickly, observers noticed. Because historically, silence is often the strategy public figures choose when facing controversial books. Let it pass, let the cycle move on. But this time, there was no silence. And that decision, more than anything written in the book, became the story. Within hours, media outlets across the world picked it up. Not just tabloids, mainstream publications, entertainment platforms, international news sites, and the angle was consistent. Not the book itself, but the reaction to it. Oh, that's the shift. That's the moment the narrative turned. Because once the reaction becomes the headline, the control begins to slip. And suddenly, the conversation isn't just about what's written, it's about why someone is responding the way they are. Now here's where the tension deepens, because this isn't happening in isolation. Harry and Meghan have spent years navigating a very public relationship with the media, from their departure as working royals, to interviews, to documentaries, to legal battles with British press outlets. They've consistently pushed back against narratives they believe are unfair or inaccurate. So in that context, a strong response isn't entirely surprising. But the timing, that's what raised eyebrows, because the book hadn't even fully circulated yet. Most people hadn't read it, only excerpts had surfaced. And yet the response came fast, direct, and undeniably emotional. And that's when analysts, commentators, and even casual observers began asking the same question. Why now? Why respond before the full picture is out? Why amplify something that, without a response, might have remained contained within a smaller audience? This is where something called the Streisand effect comes into play, a phenomenon where attempts to suppress or challenge information actually make it more visible, more talked about, more unavoidable, and whether intentional or not. That's exactly what seemed to happen here, because after the statement, interest didn't fade. It exploded. People who hadn't planned to read the book suddenly wanted to know what it contained, not because of advertising, but because of curiosity. And curiosity is powerful, especially when it's tied to mystery, especially when it's tied to conflict. Now, let's step deeper into that conflict, because this isn't just about a book, it's about perception. Over the past few years, Harry and Meghan have reshaped their public image multiple times, from working royals to independent figures in the US, to media producers, to advocates for mental health and social issues. Each phase has come with its own narrative, its own audience, its own critics, and that's important, because perception isn't static, it evolves, and right now, that perception is being challenged again, not just by Tom Bower, but by the reaction surrounding his work. Supporters of Harry and Meghan see the response as justified, a defense against what they view as unfair scrutiny, a stand against what they believe is a pattern of negative coverage. Critics see it differently. They view the response as unnecessary, even counterproductive, arguing that it brought more attention to the very thing it aimed to diminish. And somewhere in the middle is the broader public, watching, interpreting, deciding what to believe. But here's where things take another turn, because beyond the headlines, beyond the reaction, there's a deeper layer to this story, one that goes beyond a single book. It's about control. Control of narrative, control of image, control of how history remembers you, and in the digital age. That control is harder than ever to maintain. Every statement is analyzed, every word is dissected, every reaction becomes part of the story. And once something enters the public conversation, it's almost impossible to pull it back, which brings us to the turning point. Because while the statement may have been intended to push back, it created something else entirely. A moment, a flashpoint, a shift in attention. Suddenly, people weren't just asking what the book said. They were asking why it mattered so much. And that question, that lingering, unanswered question, is what keeps this story alive, because now the spotlight isn't just on the author, or the book, or even the claims. It's on the reaction, the timing, the strategy, and what it might reveal. But here's the part no one expected. The real impact of this moment isn't happening in headlines, it's happening in perception. Slowly, quietly, and possibly irreversibly, because when a narrative shifts, it doesn't snap, it drifts. Until one day it feels completely different, and right now, that shift may already be underway. But the biggest question still hasn't been answered. Not fully, not clearly. What exactly is in this book that triggered such a response? And more importantly, what happens next? Because with the official release looming and global attention already locked in, this story isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. And what comes next could redefine everything. And as the release date moved closer, the tension didn't settle, it tightened. Because now the story had crossed a line. It wasn't just about excerpts anymore, it was about anticipation. Newsrooms were ready, commentators were already forming opinions, and audiences, millions of them, were waiting, not just to read the book, but to see what would happen next. Because in moments like this, something subtle shifts. So the focus moves away from what is said and locks onto how people react to it. And that reaction? It becomes the real story. In the days that followed, discussions spread far beyond traditional media. Online forums, social platforms, comment sections, everywhere the same pattern appeared: curiosity, debate, division. Some defended Harry and Meghan's response, saying it was necessary. Others questioned whether it had unintentionally amplified the very narrative it challenged. And right there, you can see the deeper layer unfolding. This isn't just about one book, it's about influence, about who gets to shape the narrative and who loses control of it. Because for years, Harry and Meghan have tried to tell their own story through interviews, through documentaries, through carefully controlled platforms, and for a while, that worked. But books like this, they operate differently. They don't ask for permission, they don't follow the same script, and that creates friction. Now, here's where things become even more interesting, because historically, when public figures face controversial biographies, they have two choices: engage or ignore. Engaging brings attention. Ignoring risks letting the narrative grow unchecked. There is no perfect option, only trade-offs. And this time, the choice was clear. They engaged. But what happens when engagement becomes the fuel? Because as more people talked, more people searched, and as more people searched, the conversation expanded. Not necessarily deeper, but wider. And with that expansion came something else. A shift in tone. What started as a book release became a broader conversation about credibility, about media, about public image, and suddenly, the stakes felt higher. Because once credibility enters the conversation, it doesn't leave easily. Now, it's important to stay grounded here. The book itself contains claims, interpretations, and reporting that are part of an ongoing public debate. And like many high-profile biographies, not everything within it is universally accepted. That's key, because the real impact isn't just the content, it's the reaction to the content. And that reaction is shaping how people see this story in real time. You can feel it, that slow shift, that subtle change in perception. Not dramatic, not explosive, but steady. And that's often how reputations evolve, not in one moment, but across many small ones. Now, as the official release lands, another phase begins. Interviews, reviews, clips, headlines. Each one adding another layer, each one pulling more attention into the story. And for Harry and Meghan, that means something very specific. The spotlight doesn't fade, it intensifies, because once a narrative reaches this level of attention, there's no easy way to step away from it. And that leads to the question that's still hanging in the air. What happens next? Will there be further responses, more statements, more attempts to reshape the conversation? Or will silence finally take over? Because sometimes the most powerful move is to stop engaging altogether. But after what's already happened, even silence can be interpreted. That's the paradox. Every move says something, even doing nothing. And right now, that the world is watching every move, watching for signals, for shifts, for clues. Because this story isn't just about a book anymore, it's about narrative control in a world where control is fragile. It's about how quickly attention can be redirected, and how a single response can change the trajectory of an entire conversation. So as the dust begins to settle, or perhaps as it continues to rise, one thing is clear: this isn't the end, it's a turning point, and what comes after this may matter even more than what came before. If you want to keep following stories like this, stories that go beyond the surface and track how narratives really unfold, make sure you're subscribed to Royal Archives. Because in a story like this, the next chapter is always the most revealing.